I watched my stepmother sign the final document with a smile on her face, the document that transferred my father's $50 million estate entirely into her name. My father lay dying in the hospital bed upstairs, too weak to speak, too drugged to understand what was happening. She looked at me across that mahogany desk, her eyes cold and calculating, and said the words that would haunt me for the next 3 years. "You were always too naive to play in the big leagues, sweetheart. Consider this a life lesson." That was the moment I lost everything. My inheritance, my home, my father's legacy, everything 3 generations of my family had built, gone in a single afternoon. But what she didn't know was that I had just discovered something, a secret so catastrophic, so explosive, that when I finally revealed it, it would destroy not just her reputation, but her entire life. This is the true story of how I took back everything she stole from me, and so much more. My name is Victoria Hartwell, and this is my story of betrayal, patience, and the sweetest revenge imaginable. But before I tell you exactly how I destroyed the woman who destroyed my family, make sure you subscribe to this channel and hit that notification bell, because every single week I bring you true stories like this one, stories of people who were pushed too far, who fought back, and who got the justice they deserved. If you love real-life drama, family secrets, and revenge that actually works, then this channel is your new home. Now, let's get into the story. To understand how everything fell apart, you need to understand what my life was like before she entered it. I grew up in Westchester County, New York, in a sprawling estate that had been in my family since the 1920s. My great-grandfather built the Hartwell fortune through shipping and manufacturing, old money, the kind that comes with responsibility and tradition. My father, Richard Hartwell, expanded that fortune into commercial real estate and private equity. By the time I was born, the Hartwell name meant something in New York society. But my father never raised me to be a spoiled trust fund child. He was strict, methodical, and believed in earning respect through competence. "Money without purpose is just paper, Victoria," he used to tell me. "Legacy is what you build with your own hands." I took those words to heart. I graduated summa cum laude from Columbia with a degree in business administration. I worked at Goldman Sachs for 3 years, proving myself in the brutal world of investment banking. I wasn't just Richard Hartwell's daughter, I was becoming my own person, someone who could eventually take over the family business with pride and competence. My mother, Elizabeth, died when I was 15, ovarian cancer. It devastated my father. For 5 years after her death, he threw himself into work, barely existing beyond his office and our home. He became a ghost of the man he once was, functional but hollow. I understood his grief. I felt it too. My mother had been the heart of our family, the one who brought warmth and laughter to our enormous, often cold house. Without her, the estate felt like a mausoleum. But then, when I was 20, something changed in my father. He started smiling again, started attending social events, started living again. That's when he met Vivian Ashford. I'll never forget the first time my father brought Vivian home for dinner. It was a crisp October evening, and I was visiting from Manhattan for the weekend. I walked into the drawing room, and there she was, standing by the fireplace in a perfectly tailored black dress, holding a glass of champagne, looking like she'd been photoshopped into our family portrait. Vivian Ashford was objectively stunning. 38 years old, 12 years younger than my father, with platinum blonde hair, sharp cheekbones, and the kind of elegance that seemed effortless but was clearly calculated. She had an MBA from Northwestern, or so she claimed. She worked as a consultant for luxury brands, helping them expand into new markets. Everything about her seemed perfect. Too perfect. "Victoria!" My father's voice was lighter than I'd heard him in years. "Come meet Vivian. Vivian, this is my daughter, Victoria. She's the brilliant one in the family, graduated top of her class at Columbia." Vivian extended her hand with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes.
"Your father talks about you constantly. He's so proud of you." I shook her hand. Her grip was firm, professional. "It's nice to meet you, Vivian. My father mentioned he'd been seeing someone." "I hope you don't mind me intruding on your family time," she said smoothly. "Your house is absolutely breathtaking." We sat down to dinner, just the three of us, in a dining room that could seat 20. Our chef had prepared my father's favorite meal, filet mignon with roasted vegetables and a Cabernet reduction. Vivian ate delicately, asked me thoughtful questions about my career, laughed at my father's stories, and generally played the role of the perfect, sophisticated girlfriend. I wanted to like her. I really did. My father deserved happiness after years of grief. If this woman could bring light back into his life, who was I to object? But something felt off. I couldn't pinpoint it exactly. Maybe it was the way her smile never quite reached her eyes, or how she seemed to be constantly observing, calculating, measuring everything around her. There was a performance quality to her presence, like she was auditioning for a role rather than simply being herself. Still, I pushed those feelings aside. I told myself I was being overprotective, maybe even jealous of someone entering our small, grief-tight family unit. "So, Vivian," I said, cutting into my steak, "how did you and my father meet?" "At a charity gala for the Museum of Modern Art," she replied smoothly. "I was there representing one of my clients, and your father was on the board. We ended up at the same table during dinner and just connected." My father reached over and squeezed her hand. The gesture made my chest tighten, not because I begrudged him affection, but because it had been so long since I'd seen him touch anyone with tenderness. "She's been a revelation," my father said, his eyes soft. I forgot what it felt like to enjoy life again. Over the next few months, Vivian became a fixture in my father's life. She accompanied him to business dinners, charity events, gallery openings. She redecorated parts of the house with what she called a more modern sensibility. She hired a new chef, a new house manager, new gardening staff. I visited less frequently, my work kept me busy in Manhattan, and honestly, I felt like a third wheel in what was becoming their home rather than ours. The first real warning sign came about 6 months into their relationship. I was visiting for Sunday brunch when my father casually mentioned, "Vivian and I are getting married." I nearly dropped my coffee cup. "Married? Dad, you've only known her for 6 months." "When you know, sweetheart. I'm not getting any older, and Vivian makes me happy. I thought you'd be pleased." "I am pleased you're happy," I said carefully. "I just think maybe you should take more time, get to know each other better before making such a permanent decision." Vivian appeared in the doorway at that exact moment, as if she'd been listening from the hall. "Victoria, I understand your concern. Truly, I do. If I were in your position, I'd probably feel the same way. But I love your father deeply, and I promise you I'm not going anywhere. I want to build a life with him, and hopefully, eventually, we can build a relationship too." She said all the right things. She was calm, understanding, compassionate, but I saw something flicker behind her eyes when she looked at me, something cold and calculating that disappeared so quickly I almost thought I'd imagined it. My father married Vivian 3 months later in a small, elegant ceremony at the house. It was beautiful, tasteful, everything you'd expect from a Hartwell family wedding. I stood beside my father as his best woman, smiled for the photos, and tried to silence the screaming intuition that something was terribly wrong. I told myself I was being paranoid. I told myself to give Vivian a chance. That was my first mistake.
The changes started subtly. So subtly that at first I didn't even register them as problems. Vivian began managing my father's social calendar more actively. "Your father's been working too hard," she'd tell me when I called. "I'm making sure he takes time for himself, spends time with friends, enjoys his life." On the surface, this seemed caring, but gradually I noticed I was seeing my father less and less. Our weekly dinners became monthly, then sporadic. When I did visit, Vivian was always there. Pleasant, welcoming, but somehow always present, never giving me a moment alone with my father. Dad, can we talk privately? I asked during one visit. Whatever you need to say, you can say in front of Vivian, he replied. We don't keep secrets from each other. That stung. My father and I had always been close, always been able to talk openly. Now there was this barrier between us, and her name was Vivian. The second major change was financial. My father had always been meticulous about the family business, personally overseeing every major decision, but 6 months after the wedding, he announced he was stepping back from day-to-day operations. I'm 62 years old, he told me over lunch in Manhattan. I've earned the right to enjoy my life. I'm promoting Gerald to CEO. He's been with the company for 15 years. He's more than capable. What about me? I asked, trying to keep the hurt out of my voice. I thought eventually I'd be taking over the family business. My father's expression softened. Victoria, you're brilliant at what you do, but the company needs someone with more operational experience right now. Maybe in a few years, when Gerald's ready to retire, you can step into a leadership role. For now, focus on your career, build your own legacy. It was a reasonable answer, it even made logical sense, but something about the timing felt wrong, and I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't entirely my father's decision, that Vivian had somehow influenced this sudden change in his thinking. The third change was the most disturbing, my father's health. About a year after the wedding, I noticed my father looked tired. Not just tired, exhausted. His skin had taken on a grayish tone. He'd lost weight. When I hugged him, I could feel his ribs. Dad, are you feeling okay? You look like you haven't been sleeping. Just getting older, sweetheart, he said with a weak smile. Nothing to worry about. But I was worried. Over the next few months, his decline became more pronounced. He started forgetting things, small details at first, then larger gaps in memory. He became confused during conversations, losing his train of thought mid-sentence. Has Dad seen a doctor? I asked Vivian during one particularly concerning visit. My father had fallen asleep in his chair at 2 in the afternoon, which was completely unlike him. Of course, Vivian said, her voice full of concern. We've seen several specialists. They think it might be early-stage dementia. It's heartbreaking, Victoria. Some days he's completely himself, and other days— She trailed off, daubing at her eyes with a tissue. My blood ran cold. Dementia? My father was only 63. It wasn't impossible, but it seemed so sudden, so aggressive. What kind of treatment is he receiving? I demanded. The doctors have him on several medications. We're doing everything we can. I've hired round-the-clock nursing care. I'm managing all his medical appointments. Victoria, I know you're worried, but I promise you, your father is in the best possible hands. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to trust that she was taking care of him, but something in my gut screamed that something was wrong. I started visiting more frequently, sometimes without calling ahead. Vivian always seemed annoyed by these surprise visits, though she hid it behind a mask of politeness. Darling, Victoria, I wish you'd called, she'd say, intercepting me at the door. Your father's having a bad day. The doctor says too much stimulation makes his confusion worse. Maybe you could come back tomorrow. But I'd push past her, insisting on seeing my father, and I'd find him in bed or sitting in a chair, looking confused and diminished, a shadow of the sharp, vibrant man I'd known my entire life. The worst part was that on some visits, he barely recognized me. Dad, it's Victoria, I'd say, holding his hand, fighting back tears. He'd look at me with foggy eyes and say, Victoria, my little girl? Yes, Dad, I'm right here. You've gotten so tall, he'd murmur, as if I were still a child. Where's your mother? Is Elizabeth here? It broke my heart into pieces. Vivian would appear in the doorway, shaking her head sadly. See, this is what I mean about bad days. The doctor says we need to keep his environment calm and consistent. I'd leave feeling helpless and devastated, watching my father disappear into some fog I couldn't penetrate.
But then, and this is crucial, I'd call the house later that same day, and my father would answer the phone sounding completely normal. "Victoria, how's my girl? How's work treating you?" "Dad, you sound like yourself." "Of course I sound like myself. Why wouldn't I? Listen, I need your advice on something. I'm thinking about restructuring the trust." "Mr. Hartwell needs to rest now," I'd hear Vivian's voice in the background, and then the line would go dead. These inconsistencies began to pile up. My father would be coherent and sharp on the phone one day, then barely able to speak the next time I visited. The pattern didn't make sense for any form of dementia I'd researched. I started keeping notes, documenting every visit, every phone call, every interaction. I couldn't articulate exactly what I suspected, but I knew something was terribly, catastrophically wrong. The crisis came on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in a meeting when I received a call from an unknown number. "Is this Victoria Hartwell?" A woman's voice, professional but urgent. "Yes, who is this?" "This is Dr. Sarah Chen from Westchester Medical Center. Your father has been admitted to our intensive care unit. You're listed as his emergency contact." My heart stopped. What happened? "He collapsed at home. We're running tests now, but you should come immediately." I left my meeting without explanation, grabbed a taxi, and made it to the hospital in 40 minutes that felt like 40 hours. I ran through the sterile corridors until I found the ICU. Vivian was already there, sitting in the waiting room, looking distraught but perfectly composed, makeup flawless, outfit immaculate. Even in crisis, she looked like she'd stepped out of a magazine. "Victoria," she said, standing, "thank God you're here." "What happened? How is he?" "He collapsed in his study. I called 911 immediately. The doctors are with him now. They're saying it might be a stroke or possibly his heart. With the dementia, his whole system has been weakening. I want to see him." "The doctors said no visitors yet. We have to wait." I ignored her and pushed through the doors into the ICU. A nurse tried to stop me, but I pulled out my ID. "I'm his daughter. That's my father. I need to see him." She looked hesitant but nodded. "Room 3, but only for a few minutes." I walked into that room and barely recognized the man in the bed. My father, who had always seemed larger than life, invincible, looked small and frail, hooked up to machines, tubes running from his arms, monitors beeping steadily. I took his hand. "Dad, can you hear me?" His eyes fluttered open. For a moment they were cloudy and confused, but then, and I'll never forget this, they cleared completely. He looked at me with total recognition and lucidity. "Victoria," he whispered, his voice hoarse, "something's wrong, something very wrong." "I know, Dad, you're in the hospital, you collapsed." "No," he squeezed my hand with surprising strength. "Something else. I can't remember things clearly, but I know I didn't." He struggled to find words. "The documents, I signed documents, but I don't remember. I don't think I understood." "What documents, Dad?" "The trust, the estate. She changed everything. Victoria, you have to know that. You're my daughter, everything is supposed to be yours, but she made me sign. I couldn't think clearly, the medications."
"Mrs. Hartwell?" A stern voice came from the doorway. Vivian stood there with the doctor. "I'm going to have to ask you to leave. Your father needs rest." "Just a few more minutes." "Now, Mrs. Hartwell." The doctor's tone was firm. "Your father is in critical condition. The stress of visitors could cause further complications." I wanted to argue, to fight, to demand more time, but my father's grip had already loosened, his eyes closing again. Whatever burst of clarity he'd experienced was gone. I left the room, but not the hospital. I spent that night in the waiting room, despite Vivian's suggestions that I go home and rest. Over the next 3 days, my father remained in ICU. His condition stabilized, but didn't improve. The doctors ran test after test. The diagnosis was unclear. Organ failure, possible poisoning, severe neurological decline. They couldn't explain the rapid deterioration. And then, on the fourth day, Vivian told me she needed to speak with me privately. We sat in a small conference room off the main hallway. Vivian's expression was grave, her hands folded in front of her. "Victoria, there's something you need to know, something your father wanted to discuss with you, but given his condition, I need to tell you myself." My stomach dropped. "What is it?" "Your father made some changes to his estate planning 6 months ago. He updated his will and the family trust. As his wife, I'm the primary beneficiary and trustee. You're still provided for, of course. There's $1 million inheritance set aside for you, and you'll retain shares in the family company. But the house, the main assets, the bulk of the estate, they're now under my control." I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. "That's not possible. My father would never—" "I know this is difficult to hear," Vivian said, her voice maddeningly calm. "Your father was very clear about his wishes. He wanted to ensure I was taken care of, and he felt you were already successful and independent. Here, you can review the documents yourself." She pushed the folder across the table. I opened it with shaking hands. There, on page after page, were legal documents bearing my father's signature, amendments to the family trust, a new will, power of attorney granted to Vivian, financial authorizations, medical proxy, everything transferred to her. Everything. "This isn't right," I said, my voice shaking. "My father was confused, sick. These documents were witnessed by 2 independent attorneys and notarized, Victoria. Everything is completely legal and binding. I understand you're upset, but your father made these decisions when he was still competent. Multiple doctors certified his mental capacity at the time of signing." I looked at the dates on the documents. They'd all been executed over a 6-month period, gradually, strategically, systematically transferring every asset away from me and into Vivian's control. "You manipulated him," I said, my voice low and dangerous. "He was confused, medicated, and you took advantage." "Be very careful what you accuse me of," Vivian said, and for the first time I saw the mask slip. Her eyes went cold, hard, calculating. "I have done nothing illegal. Everything was properly documented. If you try to contest this, you'll lose, and you'll waste what little inheritance you do have on legal fees. Trust me, I've made sure of that." "Why?" I asked, tears streaming down my face now. "Why would you do this? He loved you. He gave you everything. Why did you need to take it all?" Vivian stood up, smoothing her skirt, then paused and looked back at me. "Your father probably has a few weeks left, maybe a month. Spend time with him while you can. After he's gone, I'd prefer if you didn't visit the estate. It will be my home, after all, not yours. I'll have the staff pack up your childhood belongings and send them to whatever address you provide." And then she left, her heels clicking on the linoleum floor, leaving me sitting alone in that sterile conference room with the documents that proved she'd stolen my entire life. I didn't go back to work that week. I couldn't. I was devastated, furious, and completely lost. Everything I'd taken for granted, my family legacy, my future, my inheritance, had been systematically stolen by a woman who'd played everyone perfectly. My father died 2 weeks later. I was with him at the end, holding his hand, while Vivian stood on the other side of the bed, playing the role of the grieving widow with Oscar-worthy performance. The funeral was huge, hundreds of people from New York's business and social elite. Everyone offered me condolences, told me what a great man my father had been, how lucky I was to have him as a father. If only they knew the truth. After the funeral, I tried to contest the will. I hired the best estate attorney I could find, or rather, the best I could afford, given that I was suddenly not a Hartwell heir, but a woman with a modest inheritance and a grudge. Miss Hartwell, my attorney told me, after reviewing the documents, I'm going to be honest with you. This case is nearly impossible to win. The documentation is airtight. Your stepmother had multiple witnesses, medical certifications of your father's competency, and everything was filed properly. Unless you can prove actual fraud or undue influence, which is incredibly difficult. But she obviously manipulated him, I insisted. He was sick, confused. These documents were witnessed by two independent attorneys and notarized, Victoria. Everything is completely legal and binding. I understand you're upset, but your father made these decisions when he was still competent. Multiple doctors certified his mental capacity at the time of signing. I looked at the dates on the documents. They'd all been executed over a 6-month period, gradually, strategically, systematically transferring every asset away from me and into Vivian's control. You manipulated him, I said, my voice low and dangerous. He was confused, medicated, and you took advantage. Be very careful what you accuse me of, Vivian said, and for the first time I saw the mask slip. Her eyes went cold, hard, calculating. I have done nothing illegal. Everything was properly documented. If you try to contest this, you'll lose, and you'll waste what little inheritance you do have on legal fees. Trust me, I've made sure of that. Why? I asked, tears streaming down my face now. Why would you do this? He loved you. He gave you everything. Why did you need to take it all? Vivian stood up, smoothing her skirt, then paused and looked back at me. Your father probably has a few weeks left, maybe a month. Spend time with him while you can. After he's gone, I'd prefer if you didn't visit the estate. It will be my home, after all, not yours. I'll have the staff pack up your childhood belongings and send them to whatever address you provide. And then she left, her heels clicking on the linoleum floor, leaving me sitting alone in that sterile conference room with the documents that proved she'd stolen my entire life. I didn't go back to work that week. I couldn't. I was devastated, furious, and completely lost. Everything I'd taken for granted, my family legacy, my future, my inheritance, had been systematically stolen by a woman who'd played everyone perfectly. My father died 2 weeks later. I was with him at the end, holding his hand, while Vivian stood on the other side of the bed, playing the role of the grieving widow with Oscar-worthy performance. The funeral was huge, hundreds of people from New York's business and social elite. Everyone offered me condolences, told me what a great man my father had been, how lucky I was to have him as a father. If only they knew the truth. After the funeral, I tried to contest the will. I hired the best estate attorney I could find, or rather, the best I could afford, given that I was suddenly not a Hartwell heir, but a woman with a modest inheritance and a grudge. Miss Hartwell, my attorney told me, after reviewing the documents, I'm going to be honest with you. This case is nearly impossible to win. The documentation is airtight. Your stepmother had multiple witnesses, medical certifications of your father's competency, and everything was filed properly. Unless you can prove actual fraud or undue influence, which is incredibly difficult. What if my father hadn't been sick at all? What if he'd been poisoned? It sounded crazy, like something from a mystery novel, but the more I thought about it, the more sense it made. The inconsistent symptoms, the rapid decline, the convenient timing with all those legal documents. Vivian hadn't just manipulated my father, she drugged him. But proving it would be nearly impossible. My father had been cremated, Vivian's choice, overriding the family tradition of burial. There was no body to test for toxins. All I had was suspicion and a journal entry. I needed more. I needed proof. I needed something solid that would destroy her the way she'd destroyed my father and me. So I decided to investigate. Not through legal channels, I'd already learned that was a dead end, but on my own, quietly, methodically. I started with Vivian's background. According to her, she had an MBA from Northwestern, had worked for various luxury brands, came from a respectable family in Connecticut. I hired a private investigator, a man named Marcus Chen, who specialized in background checks and due diligence for corporate clients. I gave him every detail I knew about Vivian and asked him to verify her story. What he found was stunning. Vivian Ashford didn't exist before 10 years ago. The woman who married my father, who stole everything from me, was living under a completely fabricated identity. Marcus Chen called me 2 weeks after I'd hired him. "Ms. Hartwell, we need to meet in person. What I've found, you're gonna want to sit down for this." We met at a coffee shop in Midtown. Marcus was a compact man in his 50s, ex-FBI, with the kind of careful, thorough manner that inspired confidence. He slid a thick manila folder across the table. "Vivian Ashford is not who she says she is," he began. "The Northwestern MBA? Fake. The work history with luxury brands? Fabricated. The family in Connecticut? Doesn't exist. Then who is she? Her real name is Victoria Brennan. No, wait." He caught my look of shock. Different spelling. Vickie. She was born in Newark, New Jersey, to a single mother who worked 3 jobs, grew up in poverty, dropped out of high school at 16, no college education at all, let alone an MBA. I stared at him, trying to process this information. How did she create this fake identity? "Very carefully and over many years," Marcus said, opening the folder. "What we're looking at here is a woman who's extremely intelligent and patient. She started building the Vivian Ashford identity about 10 years ago, got a fake diploma, created a work history using shell companies and accomplices who would verify her employment, built up a social media presence gradually. By the time she met your father, her backstory looked completely legitimate to casual investigation." But why? Why go to all this trouble? Marcus pulled out another document. Because Vickie Brennan has a history, a very specific history. She's a con artist who targets wealthy, older men. He spread out printouts of old news articles and police reports. 15 years ago, she was engaged to a real estate developer in Florida named Harold Matheson. He was 71, she was 23. He died suddenly of heart failure 6 months after they married. She inherited $2 million. "Could be a coincidence," I said, though my heart was racing. "Could be, except 8 years ago, under a different name, Veronica Stone, she married a widower in California named Thomas Prescott, tech entrepreneur, worth about $20 million. He died of organ failure after a year of declining health that his doctors couldn't explain. She inherited half his estate before his children could contest the will. Oh my God! There's more. I found 2 other cases with the same pattern, different names, different cities, but the same MO. Meets wealthy older man, marries quickly, man experiences rapid health decline, dies, she inherits and disappears. I felt sick. How many men has she killed? "I can prove 4, Marcus said quietly, "but I suspect there are more. She's smart. She moves between states, changes her identity completely each time, waits a few years between targets, and she's careful.
The deaths always look natural: heart failure, organ failure, dementia-related decline, nothing obviously criminal. But it's murder, I said. She's a serial killer. Yes, but proving it is another matter. None of these cases were investigated as homicides. The men were older, had existing health conditions, die of apparently natural causes. Without exhuming bodies and running toxicology tests, which would require court orders and probable cause, we can't prove she poisoned them. So what do we do? I asked, fighting to keep the desperation out of my voice. We know the truth, but can't prove it? Marcus leaned back in his chair, considering. We need to find physical evidence: poison used, financial records showing purchases, communications where she might have revealed her plans, something concrete that we can take to law enforcement. She's too careful for that, I said. She's been doing this for 15 years without getting caught. Everyone makes mistakes eventually, Marcus said. We just need to find hers. In the meantime, I have contacts in several police departments where her previous victims died. I'm going to reach out, share what we've found, see if we can get them interested in reopening these cases. Over the next few months, Marcus and I worked together obsessively. We built a comprehensive profile of all of Vivian's victims. We documented the pattern of her crimes. We tracked her movements between identities. But we couldn't find the smoking gun. No physical evidence of poison, no incriminating communications. Vivian was simply too disciplined, too careful. The police in Florida and California agreed the pattern was suspicious, but without evidence of actual crimes, they couldn't do anything. We need something concrete: a confession, physical evidence, a witness, something. I was running out of money and ideas. My modest inheritance was being depleted by legal fees and investigation costs. I'd taken a leave of absence from my job, unable to focus on anything but exposing the woman who'd murdered my father. And then, one evening, I got a call that changed everything. It was from Vivian. "Victoria, darling," her voice was honey-sweet on the phone, "I hope I'm not disturbing you." "What do you want?" I said coldly. "I wanted to reach out because I've heard some concerning things. Rumors that you've been investigating me, hiring private detectives, making accusations to police in other states. It's all very troubling." "I know what you are," I said. "I know what you did to my father and to all those other men. You're a murderer, Vivian. Or should I call you Vicky?" There was a long pause. Then Vivian laughed. A cold, genuinely amused laugh. "Oh, Victoria, you've been busy. I'm actually impressed. Most people would have given up by now. But let me ask you something. What exactly do you think you're going to do with this information? You have no proof, no evidence, just a conspiracy theory about a grieving widow." "The truth will come out eventually," I said. "You'll make a mistake. They always do." "Perhaps, but you know what? Even if I did make a mistake, even if you somehow found proof, by the time the legal system finishes with it, I'll be living in a country with no extradition treaty, enjoying the $50 million I inherited from your father. Meanwhile, you'll be broke with legal fees, blacklisted from your career, and known as the bitter daughter who couldn't accept your father's choices. You won't get away with this," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "You already have, sweetheart. But here's the thing. I actually called to make you an offer. Stop investigating, stop talking to police, stop wasting your time and money on this vendetta, and in return, I'll increase your inheritance. Let's say $5 million instead of $1 million. That's generous considering you're entitled to nothing. You think you can buy me off? I think I'm offering you a way to move on with your life. Take the money, Victoria, build something new, let the past go. Because if you continue down this path, all you're going to do is destroy yourself, and I'll still be here, living in your childhood home, sleeping in your parents' bed, enjoying everything your family built. Your choice." She hung up. I sat there in my tiny apartment, so different from the estate I'd grown up in, holding the phone, shaking with fury and frustration. She was right. I had no evidence. I was running out of money and options, and even if I eventually proved something, she'd be long gone. I needed a different approach. I needed to think like Vivian, strategically, patiently, several steps ahead. And then, finally, I had an idea. If I couldn't prove what she'd done in the past, maybe I could catch her in the act of doing it again.
I called Marcus and explained my plan. He was skeptical at first, then intrigued, then fully on board. It's risky, he warned, and possibly illegal depending on how we execute it. But if it works, it has to work, I said. It's the only way. Here was the plan. We would create a fake target for Vivian, a wealthy, lonely, older man, someone she'd find irresistible. Marcus had a contact, a retired actor named Robert Sinclair, who'd made a fortune in commercial real estate before moving into low-budget films. He was 67, wealthy, recently widowed, and most importantly, he was willing to help us catch a serial killer. My wife was the love of my life, Robert told me when we first met. If someone had manipulated her, stolen from her, killed her, I'd want someone to stop them. I'm in. We spent 2 months building Robert's profile, created social media accounts showing his lavish lifestyle, had him attend charity events in Manhattan where Vivian was known to circulate, made sure he appeared to be exactly the kind of target she looked for: wealthy, grieving, vulnerable, and alone. We were patient. We didn't approach her directly. We let her come to him. And sure enough, 6 weeks into the operation, at a fundraiser for the Metropolitan Opera, Vivian Ashford made contact. Robert wore a wire that night. We recorded everything. "Excuse me," Vivian's voice, silky smooth. "I don't think we've met. I'm Vivian Ashford." "Robert Sinclair," he replied, shaking her hand. "Lovely to meet you." "Sinclair, the real estate developer?" "Retired now, mostly. Dabbling in film production these days. Keeps me busy." "A man of many talents. Are you here with someone this evening?" "Flying solo, I'm afraid. My wife passed away last year. Still getting used to attending these things alone." There it was, the opening she always looked for, the vulnerability. "I'm so sorry for your loss," Vivian said, and even through the recording you could hear the calculated sympathy. "I lost my husband recently as well. It's difficult, isn't it, being alone in a crowd?" Over the next few weeks, Vivian pursued Robert with the same playbook she'd used on my father: coffee dates, gallery openings, intimate dinners. She was charming, attentive, understanding, the perfect companion for a grieving widower. Robert played his part perfectly. He seemed smitten. He introduced her to his fake lawyer. He talked about his estate planning, his concerns about his legacy, his desire to find someone to share his life with. And Vivian took the bait. 3 months into their relationship, she started talking about marriage, about moving in together, about Robert updating his will to provide for her. "I know it seems fast," Vivian told Robert over dinner one evening. We had the restaurant bugged. "But at our age, why wait? Life is short. We should spend every moment we can together." "I agree," Robert said. "I'll call my lawyer tomorrow, start making arrangements." But here's where we sprung the trap. Marcus, using his FBI contacts, had been working with the police department to get authorization for a sting operation. Now that Vivian was actively pursuing Robert, they had probable cause. We installed cameras throughout Robert's house, monitored his food, his drinks, everything Vivian might have access to. And we waited. It took 2 weeks. Robert had invited Vivian over for dinner. He was going to cook for her, make it romantic. She arrived with wine and a gift basket of vitamins and supplements. "These are amazing," she said, unpacking various bottles and containers. "They'll help with energy, mental clarity, all sorts of things. I take them myself every day." "That's thoughtful of you," Robert said, playing along. "I'll start taking them tomorrow." "Why wait?" Vivian said with a smile. "Start tonight. This one," she held up a bottle, "is especially good. Take 2 with dinner." Robert took the bottles, thanked her, set them aside. After she left that evening, we seized the supplements and had them tested at a private lab. The results came back 48 hours later. The energy supplements contained a cocktail of drugs, high doses of sedatives, memory-affecting pharmaceuticals, and most damningly, heavy metals that would cause gradual organ failure if taken regularly. We had her. The police moved quickly. They obtained a warrant to search Vivian's house, my father's house, and found a virtual pharmacy of illegal substances hidden throughout. Pills and fake vitamin bottles, prescription medications she somehow obtained without prescriptions, research materials on poisons that mimicked natural causes of death. They arrested Vivian Ashford on a Tuesday morning while she was having brunch at the country club. I watched from across the street as they led her out in handcuffs. She was screaming, claiming persecution, false arrest, conspiracy. But her performance wouldn't save her this time. The evidence was overwhelming. The poisoned supplements, the false identity, the pattern of dead husbands across multiple states. Once she was in custody, police in Florida, California, and 2 other states reopened investigations into her previous victims. With probable cause now established, they could exhume bodies, run toxicology tests, build cases. Vivian's DNA was found to match evidence from 2 of the previous crime scenes. Small things, a hair, a fingerprint, that hadn't seemed significant at the time, but now became crucial. The prosecutor was confident. "We're going to put her away for life," he told me. "Multiple counts of first-degree murder, fraud, identity theft. She's never seeing the outside of a prison cell." Vivian's trial was a media sensation. The story had everything: wealth, murder, deception, a serial killer who preyed on vulnerable widowers. The courtroom was packed every day. I attended every session, sat in the front row where she could see me, watched as prosecutor after prosecutor laid out the evidence of her crimes. She'd killed 5 men over 15 years, accumulated nearly $80 million through theft and fraud, lived a life of luxury funded by murder. The defense tried everything, claimed she was being framed, that the evidence was circumstantial, that she was a victim of overzealous prosecution, but the physical evidence was damning. The pattern was undeniable. The jury deliberated for 6 hours and found her guilty on all counts. At sentencing, the judge showed no mercy. "Mrs. Brennan, you are a predator of the worst kind. You identified vulnerable people in their moment of grief and exploited them systematically. You murdered for profit with cold, calculated precision. You showed no remorse, no empathy, no humanity. This court sentences you to life in prison without the possibility of parole on each count of murder, to be served consecutively. You will never leave prison alive." Vivian showed no emotion. Even at the end, she maintained her performance, cold, controlled, refusing to give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her break. As they led her away, she passed my seat, and I swear I saw something flicker there. Not remorse, but acknowledgement, a recognition that she'd finally met someone who wouldn't quit, wouldn't break, wouldn't let her win. I didn't feel triumph in that moment. I felt exhausted, relieved, but mostly I felt sad that my father never got to see justice done. With Vivian's conviction, her fraudulent claims to my father's estate were invalidated. The courts ordered a full audit and unwinding of every transaction she made using stolen money. It took 8 months of legal proceedings, but eventually everything was restored. The family estate, the company shares, the trust funds, everything my father had intended to pass to me. I moved back into the house where I had grown up. It felt different now. Haunted by what had happened, but also reclaimed, mine again.
I found my father's journal and his study, exactly where he'd always kept it. The last entry, written just days before he collapsed, said simply, "Something is very wrong. I don't trust my own mind anymore. If anything happens to me, I hope Victoria knows that I loved her more than anything in the world. Everything I built was always meant to be hers. I fear I've made a terrible mistake." I cried reading those words. My father had known, at the end. Some part of him had understood he'd been manipulated, poisoned, betrayed, but he'd been too far gone to save himself. At least now he could rest knowing that the woman who'd killed him would spend the rest of her life in prison. I also learned that I wasn't Vivian's only victim who'd fought back. After her arrest, I was contacted by a woman named Jennifer Prescott, daughter of Thomas Prescott, one of Vivian's earlier victims. "I tried to expose her 10 years ago," Jennifer told me over coffee. "I knew something was wrong with how quickly my father declined, but I couldn't prove anything. The case went nowhere. I've been living with that failure ever since." "You didn't fail," I told her. "You just didn't have the right evidence yet. But what you tried to do mattered. It's all part of the pattern that finally caught her." Jennifer and I became friends, bonded by our shared experience of losing fathers to a predator. Together, we started a foundation in our fathers' names, one that works with law enforcement to identify and investigate cases of elder financial abuse and exploitation. Every year, predators like Vivian target vulnerable older adults, stealing billions of dollars, and sometimes, like in our father's cases, taking lives. We're working to stop them. It's been 2 years since Vivian's conviction. I've rebuilt my life, my career, my sense of self. I run my father's company now, something I'd always wanted but never imagined would come at such a terrible cost. The estate is different than it was. I've changed things, updated the decor, made it mine rather than a museum to the past. But I kept my father's study exactly as he left it. Sometimes I sit in his chair and imagine what advice he'd give me about a business decision or a personal problem. I still miss him every single day. People sometimes ask me if I regret spending 3 years of my life hunting Vivian, if I regret the money I spent, the career opportunities I gave up, the obsessive focus on revenge. The answer is simple: no, because this was never just about revenge, it was about justice. It was about making sure that a woman who'd killed 5 people couldn't kill a 6th. It was about honoring my father's memory by ensuring that the person who murdered him faced consequences. And it was about proving something to myself, that I wasn't the naive girl Vivian thought I was, that I could be patient, strategic, and relentless when something truly mattered. She thought she'd won, thought she'd destroyed me along with my father, but she underestimated me, and that was her fatal mistake. If you're going through something similar, if someone has taken something from you, betrayed you, hurt someone you love, don't give up. Justice sometimes takes time. It takes patience, strategy, and the willingness to fight longer than your enemy expects you to. Evil people count on good people giving up. They count on you being too tired, too broken, too intimidated to fight back. Prove them wrong. Thank you for listening to my story. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. Every week, I share true stories of people who fought back against injustice and won. This channel is about empowerment, justice, and the power of refusing to give up. Drop a comment below telling me your thoughts on this story. Have you ever had to fight for justice? What would you have done in my situation? I read every single comment and I love hearing from you. Share this video with someone who needs to hear a story about not giving up, about fighting for what's right, about getting justice even when it seems impossible. I'll see you in the next video. Until then, stay strong, stay vigilant, and never let anyone make you feel powerless. My name is Victoria Hartwell, and this was my story.